Okay, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. I know Module 5 had a lot of material in it, but I want to take some time and just go through some of the big ideas in Module 5 to help you get a grip on some of this stuff. However, I know it's all new vocabulary and a lot of new stuff, so we're going to try to go kind of slow. Remember, you're hanging in and doing great. So let's face it, there was a lot of information in this module. First, we're going to talk a little bit about Pianta's contextual systems model. I know this slide says we're doing it in the inverse order, but I kind of rethought that. After that, we're going to talk about functional behavior analysis, which is a kind of a new way of thinking about how you collect data, and it pairs nicely with Pianta's idea that behavior takes place in a complex system rather than located in one particular place. Before we do this, though, I want to remember where we've been. Remember, I start off every lecture by thinking not just about what we're going to talk about this time, but connecting it to what we've been doing before. I want you to kind of hold these ideas in your head as you go through the new stuff. We want to think about discipline and how discipline is used to create docile bodies. I want us to think about the cultural relevance and responsiveness of different strategies for management. I want us to always put primacy on relationship building and understanding instead of on discipline and control. I don't necessarily believe that these are diametrically opposed, but I do think that if you kind of position yourself towards relationship and understanding rather than control, you'll come out in a better place. And remember that understanding, classrooms will have behavior problems no matter what. This isn't a way of, none of the tools we're using are a way of eliminating misbehavior entirely, because that's normal, that's childhood. But how we react to it is what we can control. So, how do we understand behavior problems, and what are some tools and theories and systems at our disposal? Hence, Module 5. The first thing I want to talk about is the contextual systems model. This is Pianta's idea, and it kind of was his big chunk of change, made him some money, got him some publications. It's a very good theory. One of the things he talks about in the book that you may remember in earlier chapters is that one of the big failures of a lot of theories and models for classroom management is that they don't take into account systems. They don't keep wedded to theory, which is really important in his estimation. And if you watch some of the lectures that I have up from Bob, you'll see that he really privileges theory. You have to know not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it. And don't just do things because they seem to work, but because they've been sort of proven by others to be effective and based in the right way of thinking. He says, improving schools is not simply a matter of changing the curriculum or changing the principal or initiating workshops on school climate. It has to be about changing the way you're thinking. Contextual systems models provide a lens through which to view children and families who must daily struggle with the disproportionate share of life hazards. So these are people that we say are at risk, although there are all kinds of problems with that phrase, and Pianta acknowledges that. Their relationship to schooling and the demands schools face in providing instructions to them. Contextual systems models map out a complex relationship between children, families, and schools. It has a wide focus, which is both great and limiting. It includes many variables across many contexts, and most importantly focuses on interactions across systems, family, home, classroom, school, community, and so on. And interactions between different groups of people, children, teachers, parents, peers, differently abled, different language groups, and different cultural groups, and so on. So there's a lot of things going on here, and at first glance you look at contextual systems models and say, oh my God, there's so much going on here, how can you possibly keep track of it? But it's the very complexity and the acknowledgement of that complexity that makes it such a strong model. So here's the figure from your book. This is figure 4.1 in your text. It clearly illustrates that understanding the child and his or her behaviors really hinges on our ability to see the child as participating in two synchronous but ultimately very different systems, the child-family system and the school system. And over here, you can see my mouse, which I ignore sometimes, the child-family system and the school system. As Pianta says, it is key to understanding risk, quote unquote, in early grades. This system also assigns kind of blame and responsibility pretty evenly. In other words, when a child is at risk in the schools, there are multiple systems and interactions that are related to the problem. So risk is distributed across these. And understanding the relationships and patterns of interactions, here we've got our interactions in here, and then we've got a simple model of the interactions down here, between the two systems can be employed in its solution. So it's not just like, gee, look at all these problems. It's, gee, look at all these possible sources for helping this child and helping these schools and helping these families. Okay, so that's the theory. One key thing about a system, any system, is that its central goal is the regulation of subordinate systems. So, for example, the school's purpose is to regulate the classroom, and then regulate the learner, right? And subsequently the child. The brain controls the organs which control the other body systems. So think about it kind of like a body system, but between these two systems there's a lot of interaction over time. So what's so great and new about this? Pianta points out that before I can't say it fast enough, contextual systems modeling, CSM, thinking about why children of color and children living in lower socioeconomic groups do poorly in school were explained inaccurately by two theories. One was the cultural difference model, and the other was the cultural deficit model. Neither one of these is good enough. The deficit model puts the blame for children not doing well in school on the home and family environment and culture. The difference model puts the blame on the school. If you're interested in learning more about the difference and deficit models and their shortcomings, you can read Chapter 3 in the Pianta book. But what I've said essentially sums it up. And further, we need to remember that these models leave someone relatively central out of the equation, not just in laying blame, but in thinking about as an asset. And that's the child. And you can see in my little triptych what Pianta calls the invidious triangle. You've got the child kind of absent down here. The child falls through the gap. It also helps to have an example to understand how this works. Loretta's example in the Pianta text is an excellent illustration of what risk looks like distributed across systems. You can pause this video and go back to that text and read over the example that begins on page 72. I'm going to go back to this screen, okay? If you were to print this out, you could actually go through Loretta's story and plot her experience of risk onto the figure as an exercise. This is not how Pianta wants the system used, because fundamentally it's a theory and not a tool, but I think it might help understand. Think as well about our conversations in the last module, about how you might seek to understand yourself by plotting your own positioning on this model. How might that help you understand your own history as a child in schooling? How might you use this model to plot out and understand what's going on with individual students who might be considered at risk? How might this kind of understanding affect your strategies for using an understanding and relationship-based focused management model? So you could conceivably see where the child sits and all the things that are going on in that child in this system and in this system, and then think about the interactions. You could even fill it in like a worksheet if you wanted to really help you, if only help you remember that the child is part of larger and dynamic systems. Now let's review FBA. So functional behavior analysis, what gives? You can see how functional behavior analysis connects nicely with our past modules and Pianta's ideas about children. That complex multi-system analyses obtained through relationships and understandings are key. Think of it this way. If a child is acting out in class and you punish him or her for acting out as a way to get him or her to stop acting out, this does not remove what he may be trying to get or avoid. So it's really a form of torture in the Foucauldian sense. FBA is not about discipline. Okay? It's about understanding. There are some basic assumptions behind FBA. One, it assumes that there is no single cause for problem behaviors. It assumes behavior is complex. It uses lots of different kinds of data to identify interventions. It focuses not just what on the writers call the overt topography, or just what you see, the tip of the iceberg, but instead treats the behavior as a symptom derived from different motivations. It asks, why does the student misbehave? It asks, what is the function of misbehavior? What is the student trying to obtain or avoid? Okay, there's always a logic. If we can help the student meet the function of misbehavior to get or avoid the thing they're trying to get or avoid in more appropriate ways, or address the whole issue of getting and avoiding, we can eliminate the need for the bad behavior. I want you to pay special attention to the table on page 4 in the reading on FBA that lays out the differences between vague, not useful descriptions of problem behaviors and concrete definitions of problem behaviors. In doing FBA, you really need to be thinking about student behavior with an eye toward understanding instead of controlling. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, anytime you feel the need to control behavior, you should stop yourself and remind yourself that your objective is not curative. Remember Foucault's curative judges, it's understanding. It is better, in this sort of way of thinking, to let behaviors go unchecked for a while if it helps you understand the child and see the function of the behavior. Okay, you're looking for the function. You're going to be collecting data. You're collecting data across systems multiple times with some degree of regularity. You'll see that there's a lot of different kinds of data you can collect. There's observation, interview, scatter plot mapping. All of these things are in the appendices and uploaded in our files on the course website. This is the general overview of what you do when you're conducting a functional behavior analysis. You're describing and verifying the seriousness of the problem. You're refining the definition of the problem behavior. What is it concretely? You're collecting information on possible functions of the problem behavior. Analyzing information using triangulation or problem pathway analysis. Generating a hypothesis about what's going on, and testing that to see if that really is the problem. There are some different outcomes as well. In addition to getting some very good information and a better understanding of student behaviors, FBA can also have some very concrete outcomes. First and foremost, many teachers and others work with students to develop a behavioral plan. The best behavioral plans are those that privilege the function of the behavior, so the teacher finds ways to help the student get or avoid what he or she plans to or has been trying to get or avoid through the problem behavior via more appropriate means. These plans can also help the teacher change his or her own behavior, classroom instruction, or other triggers to help students lessen the need for the bad behavior. At very worst, behavior plans become little more than token economies. We'll cover more of that in a following module, but you can be sure that even though these can be very effective when it comes to making abstract behavioral concepts concrete for students, Foucault would have a field day deconstructing their disciplinary potential. And I'm not going to lie, token economies get the job done, especially where there is a performance deficit. However, they kind of fall under the pay now or pay later clause. They are a temporary fix, and you're going to pay later. Trust me. FBA acknowledges that some children's behaviors go above and beyond what FBA and redirecting behavior functions can address, even going so far as to recommend aversive techniques for behavior control, so that's punishment. This is put out there even though most FBA professionals know that punishment only makes behavior worse. In the event of serious behavior problems that are scary, dangerous, or harmful to the teacher or other students, or the student him or herself, it is best to seek support from other school professionals before attempting FBA. Behaviors that are difficult to understand may point to organic problems. Okay? So you need to be aware that even though you can probably see some functions of some behavior, if things are dangerous, if things are scary, if you're not feeling equipped, you need to make sure you go to your school team and think about possible organic mental or physical problems that could be behind this. As Koplow reminds us, it's not always appropriate to use FBA in looking at trauma. You need to make sure that you understand your professional obligations for addressing and reporting trauma. And of course, there are lots and lots of critiques of FBA. So that's the end of our presentation for today, but I want you to remember, FBA is a tool. It's basically data collection and analysis. It's about understanding, about stepping back and trying to think about the child and the behavior in a way that is dispassionate and aimed at relationship building and understanding, not controlling. And secondly, systems models mean that children are parts of larger systems, so we don't locate the behavior in the child. We locate the behavior as a logical response to other things going on. That is all. Have a good night, enjoy your readings, and I'll talk to you soon.